Hey everyone, I'm Chef Cindy. I am the culinary instructor here at the Silver Fork program at the Center on Halsted. And welcome to one of our other new advanced videos. Today we're going to talk about sous videing. Now I know you've probably heard it's very on trend, it's been around for a little bit, but I'm just going to talk to you today about some of the basic principles and kind of tell you a little bit about the science and how it works and why it's really come into vogue. And now, more than ever, you can do it at home as well. So I'm going to, again, talk to you about some very basic principles. We're going to do a side-by-side cooking of a steak to show you the difference between a sous vide steak and a traditionally cooked steak. I'm also, again, going to talk to you about kind of the difference and what it is about sous vide that makes it so special. So, to start, sous vide means under vacuum in French. All right, so that pressure and the vacuumization of things is a big part of what sous vide is. And I want you to also understand that sous vide is not just about cooking, it's about creating that pressure, because we don't always need heat in order to do sous vide, if that makes sense. All right, but again, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the equipment that you kind of need for it, the technique, and again, the very, very, very basics of sous vide. So let's get started. All right, y'all, so we're going to talk about equipment first and what we're going to do. All right, so right here, I have what's called a circulator. Okay, this contraption here, you'll see different temperatures. All right, so what this does is it circulates and sets the water to whatever temperature I want. Okay. So I've got this set to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. All right now it's at 132. I'm going to wait till it hits that 130. It'll probably beep. Okay? And what it does is, again, it creates a perfect temperature for whatever it is that you're trying to cook. Okay? It holds that temperature, but not only holds that temperature, but circulates the water almost like a convection oven does, right? We know a convection oven circulates air around the oven to give even cooking. Same thing with a circulator. Okay? Is it possible to cook things sous vide without a circulator? In theory, yes. But it's a lot harder to control. You're probably not going to get the movement. I don't know if you guys can see the movement in the water right now already. Right? So just so you know, okay, these things cost anywhere from 100 to 200, upwards of a couple thousand. Okay, this is one for at home. This is mine that I use at home. And I like this one because it has the screen where you can see everything. It tells you what temperature it is, what temperature you've set it to. You can have it set up to an app, so if you're away, it'll tell you what's going on with it. Okay, this container, that's just a container. At home I'll use a pot, whatever kind of container. I'm not putting it on the stove or anything. Whatever there's enough space for me to put something. The lid, okay, is nice because it helps, again, keep any heat inside. All right, if you didn't have a lid, again, I've done it with a pot and just plastic on top. It works great. Right, it just helps the machine keep that temperature that you want it at. All right, so this is a big component of it for sure. However, again, I'm going to go over what it means for sous vide as well. But you don't always need the heat and the circulation in order for it to be a sous vide. All right, so next I've got my vacuum sealer. Okay, this is literally a food saver. You can get it almost any place that has like housewares, you know, your Macy's, your Kohl's. I think I got this one at Sears. This is a small one. And basically all it does is it sucks out all the air from a plastic bag. And they are specialty plastic bags. So in this case I have these that I've cut and made into bags. Okay, you can buy these in rolls. And you can cut them to any size. So I just buy these rolls and cut them to whatever size I want. You can also buy pre-made or pre-cut bags as well. Okay? But what this does is it sucks all the air out of the bag and creates that vacuum, right? That sous vide. That's very specific. Okay? Now, do you absolutely need this? No. Okay, to do a traditional sous vide, yes, you need this. You need that pressure, you need that vacuum. And again, you can do sous vide without one of these. Okay, this helps with the vacuum, which you absolutely need. Okay, that pressure is what you want. However, if I didn't have this, I could use just a plastic bag, squeeze out as much air as I could, and still use the circulator, to cook things gently. But more than anything, that pressure is what you want. Okay, these again, I don't even know how much they cost anymore. I've had this one forever. It's great for, you know, going to Costco, buying a bunch of meat, vacuum sealing it, and then freezing it. So it's a good investment. This does a lot of things. It doesn't take, I got one that's very small, so it doesn't take up much space. The most expensive part of this is buying the bags all the time. All right? But you definitely need the pressure. And again, I will talk about this in a second and kind of break it down a little bit more, but I just want you to see the equipment that I'm going to use. All right, so let's talk about steak. All right, so now we've got our steak, and this is what we're going to do today. Okay, I have 2 steaks, both at 392 grams. Okay, and if I put these together, pick these up very gently. These are from the same cut of meat. I just cut them in half and made sure that they were exactly the same weight. Okay, so if we take this, cut it in half, it's the same cut of meat. Okay, so both exactly 392 grams. Okay, this is going to be important so that you see the benefits and the difference between sous vide and traditional cooking. I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I want you to see the difference. Okay, with that, I'm also going to use, again, measured by grams, because grams are a little bit more precise than ounces or tablespoons or anything like that. I've weighed everything exactly, okay? So I'm going to use 4 grams of fresh rosemary, 1 gram of dried thyme. That doesn't include the weight of the string that's on there. Okay? 1 gram of bay leaf, 4 grams of whole garlic, still in the skin. Okay? Still in the skin and everything. I'm going to use 15 grams of butter, and then I've got my 392 grams of steak. Okay? 1 I'm going to cook traditionally, probably this one, and then 1 I'm going to do sous vide. Okay? So what I'm going to do with the stuff I'm going to cook traditionally, because that takes a little bit, that cooks a little bit faster, I'm going to put all this stuff away. All right, I'm going to put this away, and then I'm going to bag this stuff, and I'm going to show you how to bag stuff. All right, but again, everything is exactly the same. We're going to see them side by side to see how they differ. Okay, so I'm going to start out by preparing my sous vide bag. So I've got my bag here, right? I've got the side folded over, all right, just like we do when we do our pastry bags and stuff, right? I want to keep that as clean as possible. So, got my bag. I'm going to put my steak in my bag. All right. All right. And again, I didn't recognize, but this is a New York strip steak. It's about 1 inch thick, both of them. Again, exact same weight as the other one. The other stuff I put in the fridge just to hang out until this one's ready. Okay, so in here, I'm going to throw in my bay, my rosemary, my garlic, all that stuff right into the bag. Okay. Throw that in there. I'm also going to do, what I didn't talk about was a tablespoon of oil. Okay? I'm going to use 2 tablespoons in total for both cookings. Okay? But I'm going to put a tablespoon of oil in the bag for now. And the reason I want to do that is because that little bit of oil actually helps seal the bag even more. Okay? So straight in here, just 1 tablespoon of oil, and I'm going to use the other tablespoon for when I brown it, because again, you're going to see when it comes out, okay, it's going to be cooked perfectly, but it's going to look gray and weird. And we want that crispy brown goodness that we like with steak, right? So 1 tablespoon in here, 1 tablespoon in the pan, and I've got my butter in the back here that I'm going to keep cold for when I finish in the pan. Okay, so again, I've got all that stuff in there. The one other thing that I totally forgot, oh my god, is, of course, we want to season our steaks. Okay? So in here, I'm just going to do a pinch. Okay? I'm not measuring these only because, again, salt, usually you just kind of going to measure. You're going to sprinkle. All right? So just a good pinch. And then I'm going to do probably 3 cracks of pepper in here. There we go. All right, so everything is in the bag. Okay, so now I'm going to fold it back. I'm going to move in the camera so hopefully you can see the suction happening here. All right, so I've got plenty of space here. Steak is in the bottom. I'm actually going to move the steak a little bit towards the middle. All right. That garlic, herb, all that stuff is in there. Now, again, in these, this is a home one. There are so many different fancy ones in restaurants, okay? But just for the basic thing, this is what we're going to do. All right, so this, the end of the bag goes into the vacuum holder. All right. We're going to close this. I'm going to lock it, okay? And then I'm going to press vacuum and seal. See how tight, oh my God, it's going to go as tight as it possibly can. When the machine can't do it anymore, it's going to seal. And then we just wait for the lights to turn off. Okay, and we release. And there it is. All right, you always want to check to make sure that the seal is all the way through. It's not going to open up on you. It is very much so vacuum sealed, right? Nice and tight, nice and bright. That's what we want, okay? More than anything, you just want to make sure there aren't any creases anywhere, okay? We want a nice, tight seal. All right, so now we're going to go into our water bath. Okay, so I've got my water bath. My water bath is set to 130. Okay, we're going to cook this to medium rare. Now, should probably look at me when I say this. So medium rare. Okay, medium rare is 130 to 135. Right? So I've got this set to 130. I'm going to put the steak in there for about 1.5 hours. Now that temperature, I'm going to set at 130. No problem. Okay? The amount that you cook it for, the time that you cook it for, depends on how thick your steak is. Okay? This is, again, about 1 inch, 1.5 hours, maybe 2 hours. Okay? That's how long we're going. I'm going to go 1.5 hours for sure. I know it works at 1.5 hours. Okay? So I'm going to drop this bag into my water. Okay? And one thing you want to make sure. Sorry, guys. One thing you want to make sure is that it's completely submerged in the water, that it's not floating to the top. If it was starting to float, okay, I would just throw something on top, maybe a plate, something heavy that would hold it in place, okay? It's doing great right now. There's water all the way around. It's not sitting up against the side or sitting up against the circulator, okay? I'm going to close this lid. Again, the lid just kind of helps keep that machine working as efficiently as possible, okay? And it's going to stay at right around 130, okay? So I'm going to set a timer for 1.5 hours, and we'll check back in on it then. So while our steak cooks in the circulator there, again, set it for 1.5 hours. I'm not going to touch it. I don't have to do anything. I can set it and forget it. Well, I don't want to forget it, okay? Because this isn't like a crock pot. This isn't like roasting or cooking, right? I am setting it at 130. It's not going to go above that temperature. So I know it's not going to technically overcook. However, if you leave something in there, like a protein, right? In this case, we've got steak, chicken, pork, you can do whatever you want, okay? You can't just leave it there endlessly, okay? Because after a certain amount of time, usually around the 3 hour for something like this, like a small steak. If I was doing a big cut, that's a different story, okay? But for something like a steak, like a chicken breast, like a pork tenderloin, okay? Once you go past 3 hours, the proteins start to get mushy. And it's not so much tender anymore, it's just kind of weird. They just break down in a funny way. It's just not a pleasant thing to eat. Now, it hasn't denatured, right? Like when we cook a steak on a hot pan, which we're going to do in a little bit, right? What happens when we cook proteins and they hit something hot, right? They shrink. And they lose a little bit of water, not a little bit, a lot of water actually, right? Because proteins like that are mostly made of water. Okay? The beauty of sous vide is that because it's in a bag, it's not, it's not in water, it's not losing water, it's in its own juices or whatever other things you add to it, okay? It's not actually gonna lose that weight, and it's gonna be a very gentle, even cooking, right? And when I cook the steak traditionally, which we're gonna do, right? What happens is we're actually cooking from the outside in, right? We get that brown on the outside, and then we have to wait till we're trying to get that center to the right temperature, right? And usually that pan is very hot, right? Or we throw it into it, we start it in the pan, we throw it in the oven. That temperature, again, is real hot, right? We're trying to get that center in that certain temperature. Whereas sous vide cooking, that's at 130. It's not going to go above 130. I just let it ride. So that's the beauty of sous vide circular cooking like that, okay? So I'll give you a little bit of background. Sous vide has been around, sous vide cooking, that pressure, that vacuumization, the circulating in low temperatures, right, has been around probably since the 70s in commercial or just, restaurants, okay? Early 70s, somebody started to do that, okay? It didn't really pick up steam for a long time because the circulator was actually a science, a laboratory-based piece of equipment. Okay, so if they're testing samples and they need a certain temperature or something needs to be warmed up very slowly up to temperature that was maybe frozen, right, or in a deep freeze, they would use these really bulky, big circulators that cost, again, a few $1,000s. And when I started doing sous vide, excuse me for touching my mic, when I started doing sous vide, okay, again, it was one of those really big investment pieces. Everything was in Celsius because, again, most science is done in Celsius and metric. Okay, and it was a guessing game. There weren't books, there weren't websites really dedicated to it. Okay, this is back in the early 2000s. Yes, I've been cooking for a long time. So it was a big investment. It was harder to deal with at the time. Now it's a lot easier. There's tons of websites, there's tons of cookbooks that tell you you can buy these circulators at Sur La Table. It's really cool and fun. But I just want you to understand that it comes from this very sciencey background. Again, those vacuum sealers, right? For a long time, we only really saw those when you go to the store, right? When you see the vacuum sealed pieces of meat pre-marinated or anything like that, those vacuum sealers, again, most of the restaurants that if you work at them, they're going to have these really big industrial vacuum sealers that put a lot of pressure, or you can change the amount of pressure you put on something, okay? You're going to play with that a long time. And just so you know, specifically in Chicago, in order to have a vacuum sealer in your restaurant, you have to pay a certain fee every year, because what you're doing is you're changing the aging process of that meat, because you're not allowing oxygen to enter the products that are being vacuum sealed. Okay, and so that can affect how bacteria grows. That can affect the aging process. Right, no oxygen means it's going to slow down the deterioration of your product. Just so you know, you can't just have one of these. Chicago will find you and charge you or fine you or all these things, right? What I have, again, is strictly from my house. This is stuff I play with at my house. I'm totally fine with that. That's perfectly legal, okay? So, again, this all comes from these sciencey backgrounds, and somebody took these sciencey things, right, and brought them into the kitchen, because if anything, right, what is cooking, guys? Science, all right? So it's very important that we understand kind of what these things are. Now, the other thing that sous vide does is that, again, that pressure just helps kind of hug your fruit a little bit. And I'm actually going to show you with a pineapple what it actually does to things like fruit or plants, because their cells are different than meat. Okay? You saw that piece of steak. It didn't really change. Okay? That's because it's a little bit tougher. The cell structure of proteins like that are a lot harder. The cell structure of a plant is a lot weaker. Okay? And I do a square because they're square shaped. All right, because I'm a science nerd. All right, so I'm going to show you kind of what it can do to the structure of certain cells. All right, so here I've got this pineapple. Oops, I'm going to move my scale out of the way here. So I've got this pineapple here. Okay? And I'm going to cut a piece, and we're going to look at it. And then I'm going to vacuum seal it. And you're going to look and see what vacuuming can do, again, to the cell structure of this. Fruits, vegetables, things like that. Because you can cook fruits and vegetables, or you can just leave them like that in your water bath. Okay? So kind of bonus content of me cutting a pineapple here. So I just want to take the top off. All right, I'm going to get rid of this. I'm going to trim the bottom off. And I'm actually going to leave the rind for this because I want you to see the difference. And I can smell that pineapple. It actually smells pretty good. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut maybe 1/2 inch slice. Okay, I'm not going to worry about the core so much. Right? If you see it, right, you can't see through it. It's pretty opaque. It's nice and yellow. Right? We've got some juice happening. Great. Okay. I'm going to cut another piece. About the same size. Right? 1/4 inch or so. Okay. And I'm just going to leave it here so we can kind of compare, right? You saw me cut one, then the other. So it's all from the same pineapple. I just want you to look at it. And again, pineapples have these cores that are a little tough. Normally you would get rid of that. I'm just going to leave it for now. We'll see what happens. Okay? I'm not going to do anything else to this. I'm just going to put this into a bag. Okay? Straight in here, and I'm going to vacuum seal it. I've got my pineapple in the bag. And I'm just going to vacuum this guy up. Flip it over, I guess. It doesn't like it. All right. Okay. So again, I'm going to close it, lock it in place, hit that vacuum seal button. And I can see it pulling these juices. I don't know if you can, right? And there. Okay. So now what I've done is, it's just created this very tight seal. All right? It's very firm. So I'm going to let it hang out, for a few minutes. And then when I release it, you're going to see the difference. All right, so I've let this pineapple sit for about 5 minutes. Now the reason I let it sit, is just for that equalization of suction. So what happens when suction, right? Not only is it pulling air out of the bag, but it's also helping to pull any air that's in the actual product, right? In this case, that pineapple. And it pulls its juices out and replaces it, all that air, all that extra space in there, with its own juice. That's what makes it nice and juicy and awesome, The other thing, just while we're talking about this and that displacement, is the other thing that vacuum sealing helps to do is to help marinate things, right? So if I were to put a liquid in here, let's say like a honey, right, or cinnamon honey or things like that, or vanilla, if I wanted to infuse a flavor into this very quickly, right? We know that marinating, of course, will flavor that outside, but it won't always get super deep in there. With vacuum sealing, with sous vide, because this is the sous vide part, this would help take out the air from inside the pineapple, and as that's happening, it would press in any flavoring that I would have. Okay? Not only with that, but also it helps tenderize the fruit. Okay? Because again, with that extreme suction, as it's pulling air out of the cells, out of everything that's in that pineapple, right? It's kind of breaking those cells and making it tender. Okay? Without any heat, without anything else. In fact, this is going to taste sweeter than just a fresh piece of pineapple because we've broken down those cell walls just a little bit and release some of those extra sugars that are being trapped sometimes in underripe fruit. Okay? So, again, look at this. Okay? So we're going to compare a piece of pineapple. Again, this is just that slice that I cut, and this is the sous vide one. Right? Again, remember that sous vide is that pressure. Okay? Cooking sous vide, you need the circulator, you need all that, but you don't actually need heat to create this pressure. Okay? In order to do this, though, you do need that vacuum sealer. So I want you to kind of look at this. It looks a little bit darker, right? I don't know if you can tell, but I can definitely tell. All right? This is even closer to you. All right? It's a little paler. Okay? It almost looks a little translucent as well. That's because we've broken down the cell walls, right? So this is more opaque, and this is going to be a little bit more translucent. Okay, so I'm going to take this out of the bag, and hopefully you'll be able to see. If not, maybe we'll hold up a light, and we'll look at it. Okay, so I'm just going to bust this guy open. All right, it's only been, again, 5 minutes. Just cut this guy open, right? There, and I can see through this pretty easily. I can see my fingers through the, well, from my side over here, I can see my fingers, and again, it looks a little bit darker. Okay? See the difference? I hope so. Here, let me go back here. Can you see the difference? All right? Pressurized, not pressurized. Pressurized, not pressurized. Right? I feel like I can see this distinct striation on the pineapple here a little bit more than I can on here now. Okay? So, I'm going to grab my cell phone real quick out of my back pocket, and I'm going to turn on the flashlight. It's easier to see this when there's a little bit of light behind it. Sorry, cell phones with one hand is kind of hard. All right, so we're going to look at this. I'm going to put this light behind it, right? And you can see that light shining through. Okay? That's because, again, we've broken down those cell walls through the magic of sous vide. All right, so you can see that light, or hopefully you can, because I can see it on the camera. All right, so that's the sous vide one. Now we're going to look at the unsous vide. All right, I can pretty much see it through that center bit, right, through this part. That's a little bit less fiber, or still very fibrous, but different fibers. Okay, but everywhere else, I can't really see it coming through, right? You see the difference? I hope so. All right. So when it comes to sous vide, again, that pressure, more than anything, that pressure is helping. Okay, so I can create something that tastes completely different without any heat. It's just that pressurization of breaking cell walls, pulling out air, right? Infusing other flavors in there. Okay, I've worked at places where I've taken pieces of fruit and again added vanilla syrup or a rum syrup or things like that, or just taken slightly underripe fruit, and by just gently compressing them, breaking those cell walls, they taste much riper because you've, again, released some sugars, let things kind of open up, right? And again, marinating takes so much less time with sucking out air and replacing it back with not only its own juices, right, but with other flavors, right? So like when we marinate stuff, we always see that ring around the outside where it's definitely gone in for a while. Okay, but then that center, maybe not as much. We don't worry about it. But with sous vide, that pressurization, you can get marinade all the way into your product as well. All right, my lovelies. So while we wait, we're about 15 minutes out from our sous vide steak to be ready. Okay. While that's happening, I'm going to do our steak, a raw steak, right? The traditional way that we learned in class. And we're going to see, we're going to compare the difference. All right. So I'm going to turn this pan on nice and hot, all right, my carbon steel pan. Get that rip-roaring hot, okay? I have my butter here. I've got all my herbs and spices mixed together. Okay, what I'm going to do while that heats up is I'm going to take some paper towels and I'm going to just make sure this is nice and dry. It's pretty dry, but it helps, right? Because moisture is the enemy of browning. If there's too much moisture, it will not brown nicely. Okay, so just a little bit of moisture, that's great. I'm going to take some salt. Again, this is the only thing I didn't, pre-measure, but I'm going to go and just do a nice bit of salt. I'm going to grab some pepper real quick too. Totally put that away before I needed it. Or well, before I was done with it, rather. All right. Just a couple cracks on each side. Okay, so my pan's nice and hot. Okay, I'm going to measure out 2 tablespoons of oil. I've refilled my oil here. Okay, so I'm going to do the 2 full tablespoons. So they both have easy access to that fat. I'm going to move that around. Oh yeah, that's nice and hot. I can hear it. You can see it shimmering. All right. So I've got my steak here. And remember, we always want to put it away from us. Okay. Yeah. Listen to that sizzle. Okay. So I'm going to brown it on this side first. All right, till I get a good golden color. I'm going to flip it, add my herbs and what have you. I'm going to baste it with butter, and then I'm going to throw it in the oven to finish it. All right. Now, part of what I'm not sure you can catch it on the screen. All right, but you just pay attention next time you cook a piece of meat. All right, you're going to see it shrink down a little bit. All right, and that's just the proteins denaturing, right? And that's okay. We want that. That's normal. But pay attention to it next time. You're going to see how quickly it kind of starts shrinking up. And that's the proteins toughening, right? Shrinking, tightening up. Right? So if we've ever overcooked a piece of meat, we know how tough it can be. That's why. Right? High heat, too much exposure to that. Okay? Keep going. All right, a little bit longer. Just to get some good coloring on here. And yeah, that's a little bit more fat than I would normally use, but no shame in it. All right, I also want to make sure it doesn't stick, so I don't worry about it as much with these kinds of pans, your cast irons, your carbon steel like this. Okay, getting some good browning color on here. There we go, we got some brown there. Okay. Again, one more time, away from us. There we go. And you see there's a little bit of not as much crusty brown. Remember that we always take our butter and baste that little spot as needed. Okay, we got some good crispiness on that fat. Yeah, that fat cap that we like. All right. The only thing that I might do extra on this in both steaks that I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I hit that fat cap to make sure it gets nice and crispy. So I'm going to go ahead and throw in my garlic, my bay, my thyme, my rosemary, all that fun stuff right there. Make sure it gets infused with that oil. All right. Oh, I can smell it. Okay. Time's getting wild. Okay. I'm going to throw in my 2 butter, and then I'm going to start basting. My 2 butter meaning my 15 grams of butter. Get that butter nice and melty, mixing with that herby goodness. All right, I'm going to turn my steak a little bit, and then I'm just going to start basting. Turn my heat just a little bit more. There we go. Yeah. I can definitely smell that rosemary, that thyme, that garlic right in my fat here. Yeah. Mostly just hitting that spot that's a little bit lighter, just to get it up to speed. All right. I'm going to check the other side of my steak. Yeah, look at that. All right, so now I'm just going to hit that fat cap right there, okay? Just so I get a little bit of crisp, just a couple seconds there. Boom. All right, now I'm going to throw it in the oven just to finish it off. And while this is going and it rests, my sous vide steak will be ready, and hopefully we'll take a look at it side by side. Okay, so now is the moment of truth. All right, it's time to pull out our steak out of the circulator. Sorry, I have a mess going on here, okay? So I'm gonna just turn that off. No more circulation. I'm gonna take this straight out of the water bath. Okay. So now this has been cooking 130 degrees, right, for an hour and a half. I could literally take this out of the bag and eat it, but I'm going to show you why we're not going to do that. Okay? So literally, I'm just going to open this beast up. Oh, I can smell all those herbs and spices and the garlic and the bay. It smells awesome. Some of this thyme broke up a little bit, so I'm going to try and take some of that off. Okay. But take a look at the color, right? It's not very appealing, right? We want some of that crusty goodness, so we are going to throw it in the pan, not to cook it further, just to give us a little bit of crisp. All right, so I'm going to take it, I'm going to put it over here. I'm going to throw this stuff away. I'm going to pat it dry, and then we're going to put it back in the same pan. Okay, I cleaned it out as we did our other steak. All right, so same deal, guys. I've got my carbon steel pan. I just wiped it out, just like we always do, right? This is the stuff from the other one. So it's all going to be the same, okay? The only difference is I'm taking this steak, the sous vide one, and I'm patting it dry, same diff, right? There's going to be a little bit more moisture on these because it's been sitting in its juices, right? And then juice is always good. So all I'm doing right now is I'm just pulling some of these herbs that are already stuck on here. I want to make sure I get that flavor and that steak browned and not all my herbs, right? So I'm just patting and patting, patting, right? A lot more juice, but that's not a bad thing, okay? I just want to make sure that I get this nice and dry for the sake of browning, right? Because what did I already say? Moisture is the enemy of browning. Okay, so pan on, nice and high. Okay, and I'm going to do this a little bit tighter. I'm going to do about 30 seconds on each one, right? I'm even going to pull out my phone, and I'm going to do a 30-second timer. I'm going to do 30 seconds on each side. If it was a slightly bigger steak, maybe I'd do a minute. But since it's only about an inch thick, I'm going to go 30 seconds. And again, I'm not trying to cook this. I'm just trying to add some browning to it, okay? Just some texture, because it's already cooked. And part of the reason I did only 130 versus 135 is because I'm going to get those last couple of degrees from this pan. All right, so I had one. I'm going to throw a little more salt, not as aggressively as I did the other one, but just a little extra, because salt is always nice, right? To kind of even. I went pretty hard on the traditional one that we did. So I'm getting this nice and hot. I already did 1 tablespoon of fat in the bag, so I'm just going to do 1 tablespoon of fat in the pan this time, okay? I'm going to grab my butter real quick. Just keeping that cold. All right, so my pan is nice and hot. I'm sure you can see it smoking. I've got my hood on this time, so hopefully you can still hear me. All right, so same deal. I'm going to take our steak. I'm going to go away from me and start my timer. Get rid of this stuff while it's here. I'm not touching it. I'm not going to do anything with it. Okay, while it's in the pan, I'm just, again, trying to get those. All right, I'm not trying to, I will baste it with a little bit of butter, but I'm just trying to build my steak crusty goodness. Okay. I might move this because it's not quite in the pan. There we go. 30 seconds, not that long. Okay. Had to restart it, but I'm going to cancel that. There we go. Ooh, yeah, look at that. Nice. Okay. Same deal here. Away from myself. I'm going to start that. 30 seconds. Okay. And then, when I'm about 10 seconds away here, or 20 seconds in this case, I'm going to throw my butter in. Okay. Take my butter, let it melt. All right. The herbs and what have you are already all up in there. All right, I'm just going to baste it, baste it. Here's my timer. Okay. Now I'm going to take it. Oh yeah. Woo! And I'm just going to hit my fat cap. Okay. Fat cooks weird. Right? It gets gristly and sad in the sous vide, so you definitely need to hit it. Get it a little bit crispy. Yeah. Oh yeah. I'm going to put this on my cutting board over here, and we're going to cut side by side and check it out. Okay, so now we have our steaks. This one was in the oven. This is the traditional one. Here's our sous vide one. Okay, so I'm going to just take this. This has been resting. Came out of the oven right before I started cooking the last one. All right. It's a little hot, so I'm going to take this, put it right here. So it's just been resting. Okay. Then we have our sous vide. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to slice this. And I'm going to slice this and we'll take a look at it. Okay. So, feel about the same, so that's good, I guess. Actually, I'm going to move this one so it is the same. So that little tidbit at the bottom, right, our New York tidbit that we like. Okay. Definitely cooled down a little bit. That's all right. So I'm just going to slice that. And I'm going to slice this guy. Right. And with the sous vide, after you sear it, you don't need to rest it because it's already been cooked. We're not looking for residual. Right. We're just looking to get that color. It's nice and hot. Right. There we go. Oh yeah. We'll definitely see the difference. All right, so this is the traditionally cooked steak, right? This is just barely hit that 130 when I pulled it out, so it's definitely got that. Right, so what I want you to see on here, right, is this gray band, right? That's what we're used to. We're used to, right, a darker, crispier on the outside, right? And then kind of a rare pink inside, okay? That's traditional. That's what we look for. And the reason this happens is because we're cooking from the outside in, right? So it's going to be more gray, it's going to be more cooked right on the outside and then more tender on the inside, right? That pinky color. That's what we look for when we make these steaks in the traditional style. Okay? But what I want you to see, right, is that you don't have that with sous vide. Okay? This is, you might have just a tiny bit, right, of difference because we did put it in a pan, but then you see how it's nice and even all the way through. It's nice and even pink, right? Because it didn't have that change in temperature. It was super even flow, right, in that water bath. It's nice and juicy, I can tell you that, because it's dripping down my hand. We can even pick up a different one. All right, we're going to see the same deal, right? There's no bullseyeing, there's no gray band. Okay, so that's the sous vide. Again, we'll pick up the traditional, right? You see that, especially right here, right? You can see the change happening. Right? These both got cooked, exact same temperatures, but different technique. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to taste the traditional one and tell you how it feels, tastes, whatever. Okay, same piece of meat that we were looking at. I'm going to throw maybe not the whole thing in my mouth. Okay. No. Juicy. tender. It's not super chewy, but definitely has a lot of chew to it. Right? If I'm honest, I can taste a little bit of rosemary. I can taste some salt. And I taste meat. Especially that little end piece that I just took. I'm still chewing. Right? Tastes good. Steak. What's not to like? Alright, so now I'm going to take our sous vide. Wow. So I can really taste. I'm going to chew. You're going to look at me. I can really taste the herb throughout the meat. I can taste the thyme and the rosemary and the garlic. As soon as it hit my mouth and all the way through the meat. Like it's flavored the meat really well. It's also still got that chew from the New York strip for sure, because that's just the nature of the beast. But it's so much less chewy. It's very, very tender. I'm actually even going to put the last piece in my mouth. Oh man. Now don't get me wrong. Traditional, tastes delicious. I'm not going to kick it out of bed for eating crackers. Right? We do it this way for a reason. It's fast. It's traditional. Don't need special equipment. But there's something very special about this sous vide. It tastes so tender, right? We know this was from the exact same cut of meat. It wasn't like I got them from different cows or different places. I took one piece of meat, cut it in half, so it's from the exact same place. This one is just so much more tender, okay? I can really taste all those herbs. I can really taste the garlic. I taste the meat also so much more in a way, even though I can taste the herbaceousness of everything. And the salt, and I still get that crispy goodness. I still get very tender fat. Even though I crisped it up, I got a little bit more just like, I can eat that fat. Not everybody's into that, and that's okay. So what I want to point out here too, right? The only thing about sous vide that kind of freaks people out is if you're like, oh, it's pink, I can't eat it. But we know it's already been cooked to medium rare. In fact, you can cook this steak till well done in sous vide, right? You can do 150, 155. It'll still look very pink, right? Because it's been cooked so gently and evenly all the way through that it'll still retain that color, right? Even if you sear it off, you're still going to get a fair amount of pink in there. And that kind of freaks people out a little bit, because then they're convinced it's not cooked all the way. It's a mental block that a lot of people have, okay? As we know, right, it's your preference. That's totally fine. But 130, 135, medium rare is going to be perfect every single time if you sous vide. Easy to overcook a steak traditionally, right? We've done it. I've done it. Okay? But you're always going to get perfectly cooked steak with sous vide. Now, pros and cons, right? Let's talk about another con. This takes a lot of preparation. That took about an hour and a half, and then searing it and all that stuff, right? If I was working in a restaurant, however, and steak was a big one, right? One of the major dishes, I would sous vide a bunch of these steaks ahead of time, right? And instead of going straight into the pan from the machine, I would put them all on ice, still in the bag, let them hold all that juice and goodness, chill them, and as I need them, I would just open them up and make sure to throw them on the grill, your flat top, a pan, whichever one you're doing, right? And just bring it up to temp, get that brown, boom, done, right? This takes a little bit longer. But if you're making a lot of steaks, maybe it's not, it's not the best choice necessarily all the time, right? To sous vide something. Sometimes just throwing a piece of steak on a grill, on the griddle. It depends on the cut. It depends on a lot of different things. But these are options, right? If you can figure out sous vide, it might cut you back on some time, right? Much faster to throw it on the pan, the griddle, than this. Okay. What if it's a really thin piece of meat? Maybe there's no point in sous videing it, just throwing it on the grill right, or an oven or whatever is much faster. It just depends, guys, right? So pros and cons, both sides, but having options is always a great thing. Okay, guys, so I hope that this has brought you a little bit more understanding of what sous vide, vacuum sealing, circulation cooking, all that fun stuff, what it kind of means. And this is just the very tippy top of the iceberg, guys. I'm just trying to get you some ideas and understand what these things mean. Whether you read a recipe yourself or try it out yourself, or if you go out and you see it out there, just understanding really what it means. So hopefully, again, you guys got a little bit of that understanding. If you guys are watching on YouTube, please subscribe, hit like, that helps us out a lot. Also, comments, let us know what you want to see. If you have recipe ideas that you want to help working out, let me know. I have recipes for sous vide. You can sous vide hollandaise sauce. You can do potatoes. You can do all kinds of veggies and amazing things, eggs. All right. So if you're more interested in it, let me know. I can definitely give you some more resources. But until then, I hope you guys try it out or read up on it or learn a little bit more. All right. I'll see you next time.